Help, my dashboards suck. What do I do? They really, really, really suck. You want to know how bad they suck? Take a look. This is actually kind of real. This is from a study done in London to try to figure out if people can understand their car dashboards. So they created this one to try to quiz people on what all those symbols mean. Turns out that at least British drivers can't make out all these symbols. Okay, sorry, Ahmad. Okay, so we know dashboards suck. A little bit about myself. My name is Irfan Ahmad. I'm the CTO and co-founder for Cloud Physics. I used to work at VMware before Cloud Physics for about 10 years. And I worked on the storage I/O control, the storage DRS, virtual interrupt coalescing, and several other projects. So we founded Cloud Physics for all kinds of reasons, mostly to do with helping customers with operations management. We're a SaaS product. I'll talk a little bit about this at the end as well. So for a while, we did not have dashboards in our product. And now we do. So this is kind of all the lessons that I've learned about dashboards through that journey. Okay? So first of all, this is the 1972 Maserati Boomerang. Okay, and I thought that was kind of an interesting example of a dashboard. So this is a car dashboard. Yes, it is the case that every instrument is inside the wheel. Okay, so that is very true here. Okay, very, very interesting. The car actually went into production, so you can actually, if you go to like antique car shows, you can sometimes see this car. And the dashboard is actually really, really funky. A lot of different instruments. You can see that the signal switch is inside the dashboard. Okay. Let me give you another example. The 1982 Lancia Orca. Now this is actually way out there because, like talk about like, overdoing your graphs and overdoing your data. So just something as simple as speed is now converted into something actually pretty complicated. So definitely overkill. Right? Now it's hard to see, but on the left-hand side, there's actually another tiny dashboard. So there's actually multiple dashboards on this thing. And for those of you who are able to see this, there is indeed a red button that says Max on it. So who knows what that's for? But there's a Max button. Maybe it's like the Night Rider, turbo boost button or something like that. I mean, if I had that car, I'd be pressing that button all the time, wouldn't it? All right. So, of course, then you got the Tesla Model S. So if you haven't driven it, give it a test drive. Fabulous car. And one of the things I really liked about it when I drove it was the innovation in the dashboard. It's beautiful, obviously, but it's also very functional. So they've taken a lot of the complex representations of data and they tried to make that really, really simple. Okay. So I thought we'd go kind of on the other direction. So we are VMware and virtualization admins. So as vAdmins, we like to think of ourselves as, pilots, so we're kind of jet pilots, controlling this complicated thing, as complicated as a jet, as complicated as maybe the space shuttle. So maybe your data center is like the space shuttle. So let's look at the space shuttle dashboard. So is this good dashboard design? I don't know. I'm kind of split on it. So why am I split on this? So there's a lot of buttons, so there's a lot to know. So there's some training involved, right? So that's the thing when people look at jet dashboards, or in this case, the space shuttle dashboard, they're often overwhelmed by the amount of different controls and different information. So that's kind of something to think a little bit about, is that good or not? But actually, in reality, this is actually one of the best dashboards ever invented, okay? Because every single needle, every single light means something, and it is in context of something. So sure, it takes a little bit of training, right? But it is actually quite remarkable how, in a single glance, an astronaut, or in the case of a modern fighter jet, is instantly able to figure out what's going on, what does it mean, what do I have to do, and then go into that observe, decide, and act loop from that, right? So there's a lot of lessons we can derive from looking at dashboards of the type that you find in jets and in the space shuttle on how we can design our dashboards. So good lessons to be learned here. So now let's think a little bit about what is not done well in the dashboards that we're used to seeing, okay? So the first thing is, with bad dashboards, is the dumbing down of information. So there's this really tight tension between trying to make things simple so that at a single glance, you will be able to figure out what's going on, versus making things too simple, and maybe simple is the wrong word, and that's why I said dumb here. So what we want to do is to make our dashboards simple but not dumb. So if you see a bunch of green and a bunch of red, and you're kind of sitting there trying to figure out what that means, you've crossed the threshold, okay, you're now in the territory of dumb. The other thing that happens a lot, and I think is a sign of a bad dashboard, is that you are burying the information that's relevant. Okay, fine, you want some green, okay? Maybe Christmas colors are useful, red, let's throw some red in there. But, what does it mean? How are we going to get the context around it? Right, so this is where the difference happens between the good dashboards that we saw before and the bad ones, because I'm not against color, but where's the context? How am I supposed to figure out what to do about this, right? And then the death by bird's eye view. Like, I really don't want people to build more heat maps. Talk about loss of context. Talk about, what am I supposed to do about that, right? So let's not do that again. There's enough of that has been done. Let's not do that. And the lack of scoping. So one of the reasons the Space Shuttle dashboard has a lot of surface area is actually scoping. So immediately, if you're flying a jet and you need to know something, you immediately look in the right side, right part, right section of your dashboard, and you'll get the information that you need. Okay, this looks overwhelming to somebody else, but when you're in the cockpit, that's really useful. And so what we have is we don't have scoping in a lot of our dashboards. So is this the West Coast data center? And all the relevant information about the West Coast data center, is that scoped in the right way that I can actually make use of it and make sense of it, okay? Now, let's go further a little bit. So we talk about bad dashboards, now let's talk about ugly dashboards, okay? So the theory is, and I talked to a lot of customers, and I mentioned that in our product we didn't have dashboards, right? And our customers kept asking for dashboards. Well, you already have dashboards. You already have 3 or 4 or 5 products that give you dashboards. Why do you want Cloud Physics to give you another one? So that was a clue in our head to say there's something wrong here, okay? And so I'm sharing those lessons. So the theory with dashboards is that they get your managers off your back. Now, I hope there's no managers here. Apologies to managers in advance. But the reality is that the manager is now surgically attached to your back. Okay, so why is that? Well, because you remember those red and those greens that don't have a lot of context? Well, now you're showing those to your manager, aren't you? So what is a phone call? The phone call you used to get before is, well, can I get the report? And you spent time, and now you brought in a dashboard. So now the question from your manager is, well, what does this mean? Well, why is it red? Well, it's okay. This red is okay. Well, but why is it red then? Go fix it, because I don't want red, right? So now you've gone too far, and so dashboards have become, worse than bad. They've become ugly. So, the couple of quotes, one from one of our customers who said that every dashboard request from my boss, that's a week burnt, right? Because that's how complex these things have gotten. Building metrics and then other metrics on top of those and other metrics on top of those. Another one from Michael White, who used to work at VMware. He's got a mailing list, a fabulous mailing list. Check it out. And he said, one click to info. So the first click feels kind of good because it's info, right? The second click to pain, right? So that's another thing, which is depth, right? Do you really, when you add context, do you want the first level of context and then to be able to drill and find the relevant information from that? Okay, so we've talked about kind of what's wrong with dashboards today. What the signs are that your dashboards are not working in your favor. Now let's talk about what good dashboards should be like. So from an IT dashboard point of view, our belief is that, and working with customers, that a good IT dashboard cannot just be issues. It has to be both issues and symptoms. So today what we find is that a lot of symptoms. So you got all these dials that are going up and down, right? And oftentimes very quickly. So you get a sense of symptoms. So a symptom would be, there's some amount of higher latency, okay? But is that an issue? Well, if you don't know that if it's an issue or not, why is it on your dashboard? Okay? So now what you want to do is you want to bring your issues. So now you want a system, you want the dashboard to actually be filtering and not just giving you symptoms, but also actually filtering those down and giving you some little bit of extra intelligence so you get access to what's actually wrong with your environment, not what might be wrong or not what might just be variability, okay? So one first critical thing is issues. Now what I'm showing here is an example of some issues. In this case, instead of showing latencies, this particular dashboard has taken those and converted them into contentions. So a little bit of high latency here, there may not be a problem, but it is a problem when something is affected by it, when there's a virtual machine that is actually affected by it, okay? So what this dashboard did, I think an example of a really good dashboard is it converted those into actual issues, and now it's giving you a count of those issues, and so that you can now track down and see if there's anything abnormal going on. Another example is that you don't want static thresholds. So if you have a static threshold when things go red and green, an example of that is 90% full on my data store. Well, if you have a 20 terabyte data store, 90% full is not that useful. Okay? So that's a really kind of simple example, right? Well, so let's talk about another one. What if the data store that you have is 99% full, but all the files on that data store are already fully grown? So now there's no growth that's happening, right? So that's another example. So if you were to use basic thresholds, you'd get red all over the place. You wouldn't actually be able to look underneath and see what's going on, and you'd be a lot of false positives. So instead of that, what we want predictive models. We want models that actually really understand, and we want them to be predictive. So example of understanding is not just looking at thresholds, but also looking at how much space is there, how much growth is there, actually building that into the model, and then being predictive on top of it, so you can see how the model is evolving and then predict forward based on that. So the example here is about disk space, as I mentioned, and some probabilities being calculated based on, in this case, some Monte Carlo simulations, so that once again, that you're not seeing just disk space, you're actually seeing a model that's predicting where that's going to go, the directionality of that. Okay? So another example of what I think is a really good dashboard, and in this case, it's actually really important. What it's avoiding, and I'll explain it in a minute, but what it's avoiding is this common mistake, data in, data out. Well, there's a lot of data in, so that ends up being a lot of data out. That's, again, not what we're looking for. So here what we have is data in and analysis out. So instead of, once again, looking at IOs and storage IO problems as represented by IOPS or latency or outstanding IOs or megabytes per second, what we're seeing here is actually kind of a very rich dashboard. So I won't have a time to go into this in a lot of detail, but when you see a dashboard which looks like that space shuttle dashboard, you know you're onto something. So here, you see a bunch of virtual machines and on their problems, the trends of their problems, the directionality of the signal, okay? You also get to see context about whether that's getting better or worse over time, right? And you get to have this small spark line that gives you that trend visually. Now, you see that in one glance, right? And you exactly know what's going on. So again, data in, analysis out. So that's an example of what I think is a really good dashboard. And in this case, this drills down further and also gives you not just all the virtual machines that are affected, but the ones that are causing it, because those are the ones you're going to be able to do something about. Okay? So actionable information and filtered through analysis. The other thing that's, I think, actually kind of problematic is that most of our dashboards today, they're either looking at months or they're looking at real time. But the same tool is not able to do both. So the result of that is that you always have to switch tools. So a good sign for a dashboard, from my point of view, is the ability to zoom out all the way. You want to be able to see 6 months. You want to see a year. Okay? But when you need to, you want to go down to seconds, not without needing to switch tools. Okay? Very good sign. If you see that in a dashboard, you know you're onto a good one. Okay? Now, let's avoid that one click to information and 2 click to pain, right? By allowing the second click to actually give you the full download of information. So this is the same dashboard as before, which is the storage IO contention dashboard, which I mentioned I think is a really good one. But if you click on it, now all of a sudden you get access to the full information. It's relevant to that problem that was brought out in the dashboard. So in this case, you get to see all the virtual disks and the data stores that they're sitting on. You get to see the peak latency and the average latency, the average throughput and IOPS. Okay? You get to see the trend of each of those metrics for 7 days and 30 days, right? And that was one click. So now you went from a VM that had a problem and you did a bird's eye view. And the bird's eye view gave you a notion of directionality and so on and so forth. But then you click on it and it's a full download, right? So that, again, very good sign of a good dashboard. The other thing that's interesting, I think people make this mistake a lot, is that they want their dashboard to be customizable. And I'm all in favor of customization, don't get me wrong. Okay? But the best dashboards are the ones that are curated. Now imagine walking into that space shuttle that we were talking about, or a modern commercial airliner, and the pilot walks in and spends the first few hours of his flight adjusting and tweaking his dashboard. Let me move this from here to here. Let me tweak that signal up or down. Would that really work? Now, we had to learn from the airline industry, which has become one of the safest industries in the world, despite the fact that hundreds of millions of passengers are moved every year. So why is it that they were able to do that? Well, one of the ways is that their dashboards are very curated. They are solution engineered, right? So that we're all learning from each other, and pilots learn from each other and build those, and they customize only as necessary, right? But that uniformity is really the best of breed solution for that particular instrument and that particular signal. So this idea of curation is uncommon. The idea of engineered solutions for our dashboards is uncommon. And I think, again, if you see a dashboard that the designer of the dashboard has gone to the effort of really designing and curating and engineering it, that's a good one, okay? So we've talked about a lot of different types of dashboards, and we've drawn inspiration from what I think is actually a really good industry for us to look at as IT, and that is airlines and shuttles. So this is you, my friends. You are running a commercial airliner. You're running something that's complicated as a commercial airliner. And if you think about it, to be a commercial airliner pilot requires 1,500 hours of flight time. That's 1,500 hours for a commercial airliner. We in the IT community, in the first few years of our career, we hit 5,000 hours in data centers and in front of our tools. So if we have the type of exposure and the time spent in front of our tools that is on par with fighter jets and fighter pilots, we need tools that are as good as that. We need tools that are as good as what is available to those industries. Thank you.